Kia ora, good evening. The Southland Food Bank is a service that started as a short-term fix 23 years ago, but is now showing no signs of stopping, with an alarming growth rate in the number of people being fed through the service. Although there's steady demand year-round, winter does bring its own pressures for some when it comes to staying fed.
Yeah, a quick example is since this time last year, the last 2 months, the food going out has increased by 27% over the last 2 months as compared with last year, so things are on the increase, unfortunately.
What sort of clientele is it changing?
No, the clientele doesn't change. It's right across the board. You have single people, married couples, domestic purposes, and now the big worry now is the senior citizens that are coming through.
But in winter, if you have other costs like heating the house or running the car a little bit more, those types of things, does it have an effect, do you think, on the household income?
Yes, the winter is the worst period, of course. As you say, you've got the medical expenses of the doctors, then you've got the heating and the general increases right across through the winter. But it eases up when you get over the Christmas period.
As far as supplies, where do they come from? How do people donate to this?
Well, most of our donations come through other societies like the Lions and Rotary, Probus and all those sort of things, and churches and schools. So it's right across the board, and people of Southland are very, very good at donating.
You've been involved for quite a number of years, but it did just start out as a 2-year project, but unfortunately that has proven not to be the case.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, in 1991 the food bank was set up, only for 2 years to overcome a bit of a problem. But as you can see, we're still going strong, and the demand is actually increasing, which is very alarming.
Where do people get referred from for this service?
Well, our referrals come through all the agencies, like Budget Advice, Women's Refuge, Family Start, you name it, we deal with the whole of them. And we deal with the Vincent de Paul, and we keep in touch with the Salvation Army as well. We just thank them for the generosity, and we wish we could close down. That's our objective, but unfortunately it's not going to happen. With the coming election, it may change things, but it probably won't, so we just got to battle on.
Do you have any government funding through the service?
No. All our funding comes from the local funders, i.e. the Licensing Trust, Community Trust, COGS, Lottery, and anywhere else we can tap into.
Advertisements for jobs were on the rise in June, with a solid 18.6% increase in newspaper job vacancies in the past year. The lift in job advertising is consistent with a continuing but more modest rise in employment growth, according to a report released by ANZ Bank, with ads in June being just 6% higher than April. Nationwide internet job ads rose seasonally adjusted 3.8% in June, but remained below the record high measured in April. Total job advertising lifted in all 3 major centres. ANZ is forecasting the unemployment rate will ease to 5.5% by the end of the year. Visitor arrivals to New Zealand reached their highest level ever for a June month, with growth driven by visitors from Asia, especially Japan and China.
For the month of June this year, 2,600 more visitors arrived than June 2013, while in the year to June, visitor arrivals were up 6%. Kiwi residents also travelled overseas more in the last 12 months, racking up 2.24 million trips, a 4% rise on the previous year. Migrant arrivals for the June 2014 year are also up 14% on 2013 to 100,800. And with migrant departures down 22%, there was a net gain of over 38,000 migrants. In the latest year, New Zealand had a net loss of 8,300 migrants to Australia, well down on the more than 31,000 the previous year, according to Statistics New Zealand.
It wasn't the normal racing you'd see at Teretonga Raceway at the weekend near Invercargill. Driver skills of a different kind were being tested, with fire service personnel competing for the top title at the 2014 United Fire Brigades Association National Drivers Challenge. 78 fire service personnel hit the books on Friday for theory tests before heading to Teretonga Raceway to take part in the annual United Fire Brigades Association National Drivers Challenge. The event's normally held alternatively at Ruapuna in the South Island and Manfield in the north, but this year Teretonga won out.
Up till now, Invercargill hasn't been one of the normal circuits, but last year, after our Jesse Wilcox managed to pull off the Drivers' Challenge, we offered to host the event down here.
The competition is not only a test of courage but also replicates real-life situations.
Everything we have here is definitely what we come across on the fireground or going to the fireground. Parking of vehicles is always one thing. There is also our emergency braking situations and sudden lane changes.
Drivers' reaction times are tested with split-second directions.
One of the other events is a squeeze lane, so you'll be driving again at a reasonable rate of knots, I think around about 50-60 km, and come to a corner which really comes on to try and get round. There's parking events, slalom and emergency braking.
Points are deducted for cones knocked over, and at the end of the day a points tally reveals the winner.
In the volunteer area you've got the professional drivers, and you might get people who've never been behind a truck apart from driving fire engines, and they're all pretty much equal when it comes to this sort of thing.
Defending champion Jessie Wilcox of Invercargill says training takes place throughout the year.
We train on Tuesday night and just driving the truck in real life situations to calls, and also on training nights just getting out there and being on the truck and being familiar with your truck and these similar sort of situations that the competition is meant to replicate.
Precise measuring and marking up with cones keeps the level of challenges high.
So far the most difficult bit's been the straight line driving and the judging clearance. They've changed the competency there a wee bit and up the game a wee bit, testing people and adding a bit more to the course.
Although Jessie didn't take out the title this year, it hasn't put him off competing in the future.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll definitely be back, mate.
It's unclear at this stage whether the event will be hosted at Teretonga again in the future, but organisers are hopeful. Margot Sutherland, South Today News. And the winner of this year's competition was Tom Reid, a senior firefighter at Christchurch Airport. Stay with us, still to come. Labor promises a solution to the city's emergency housing problem and relief from LVRs. Welcome back. There will be provision for temporary housing for the city's homeless should there be a Labor-led administration. This a commitment from Labor's housing spokesperson Phil Twyford. Mr Twyford met this afternoon with the Salvation Army and the Breathing Place Southland Trust to discuss the urgent need for emergency housing for the city's homeless. Mr Twyford also wants relief for home buyers in regions like Southland saddled with high deposits under LVRs instituted to address the Auckland housing boom. Hunter Andrews asked him first about the city's emergency housing issue.
So it was interesting to hear from the Salvation Army that Invercargill really doesn't have any social housing provided on an emergency or temporary basis for people who are in strife and need a decent roof over their heads. This is not unusual, I have to say, around New Zealand. The policy of the current government in this respect is very patchy. There's no consistent provision of emergency housing. And that's something that Labor's going to deal with. We're going to make a commitment to provide, through Housing New Zealand, a quota of homes in towns and cities around the country with the support of organisations like the Salvation Army to ensure that when people are really in strife and they need a decent roof over their heads, that they do have somewhere to go. And that's giving people a bit of a hand up and giving them the basis upon which then they can then move into a private rental or state housing or something a bit more sustainable.
Yeah, we've got a trust down here that has formed to fill that role or try and provide housing. Are you saying that Labor would intervene and actually fund them, and or would it be Housing New Zealand doing?
Well, it's very hard for non-government organisations like the New Trust in Invercargill or the Salvation Army to provide this kind of service under their own steam. It's just too expensive. But through Housing New Zealand, we have access to thousands of houses throughout New Zealand that are there as state houses for this purpose. It's just a matter really of providing a bit more funding for the advocacy and support that people need to help them get their lives sorted out and then move into some housing that's more sustainable for the long term. So we are going to make a commitment in that area during the election campaign.
You're also the spokesperson for Auckland Affairs. Let's talk about LVRs. It seems quite unfair to be targeting, Southlanders I speak to certainly say it's unfair that we should be subsidising, coming up with 20% deposits for houses down here when the problem really is in Auckland.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Reserve Bank basically has been pushed into a corner by the current government's failure to get a grip on the Auckland housing crisis. The Auckland housing market is so out of control. Houses are going up by about $72,000.
Could we not have seen that though under the Clark government?
Well, there was a housing boom actually under the last Labor government, but interestingly, prices were going up in the regions at about the same rate as they were in the cities. The boom was right across the whole country. Also, wages were going up quite fast. What we're seeing now is that household incomes have been flatlining for most people, and all of the growth for the last 6 years has been happening in Auckland, where you've got an out-of-control housing market, and in Canterbury, where there's a terrible shortage of houses left by the earthquakes. Now, the rest of the country is either just standing still or going backwards. The housing crisis is widening the gap, not only between the rich and the poor, people who own property and people who don't, baby boomers and Gen X and Gen Y, but this big divide is also opening up between Auckland and the rest of New Zealand. And I don't think that's good for us as a country.
Do you think there's some form of resentment there?
I do, yeah. I think that, as Labor's spokesperson on Auckland issues, people hear me on the TV and on the radio saying about how we've got to fix the housing crisis in Auckland. And I get letters from people in Invercargill saying, I don't want my taxes spent helping Auckland to grow faster. We've got plenty of houses here. We just need more jobs.
Without diminishing the importance of Auckland to the New Zealand economy, though.
That's right. I mean, I'm certainly I'm not trying to foster this idea of it's kind of Auckland versus the rest of the country, but I don't think it's healthy for us to shift more and more resources and more growth to one place in the country. I think we've got to take regional economic development more seriously. That's why I don't want LVRs, these loan-to-value ratio lending restrictions, and ever-rising interest rates to be hurting people in Invercargill. I don't want to see Invercargill's state housing stock cut in half and the proceeds flicked off to Auckland. That's not fair on this community, and it's not good for New Zealand.
Winter shoppers were out in force at the weekend picking up bargains at the Southern Crafters Craft Market. The Midwinter Crafters Market was held at the Velodrome at Stadium Southland and was brimming with 180 store holders selling their wares from around the country. An improved food court area this year saw over 20 food stalls selling the likes of Manuka smoked bacon and egg sandwiches and sought after venison. One of the highlights this year was furniture and platters being made from old wine barrels. Organisers were amazed at the great family atmosphere and say thousands took advantage of the free entry on offer. The next Crafters Market scheduled for November. And that's all from the news desk this Monday. Sport follows the weather next from the news team. Good night.